So I want to talk first about Braylon Mullins because he's kind of the hot name, at least for Indiana fans, in terms of the interest. And I know that they offered him relatively early in the process, but now the fact that they weren't able to secure a commitment earlier, now they're fighting off a list of kind of the who's who in college basketball. You look at who he's being recruited by: North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Purdue, Kansas, UConn, Michigan, Kentucky, Duke. It's everybody who matters in the sport is after him. You mentioned him always kind of being at this level as a player in your eyes. What was it just a matter of he got hot this spring in front of the not saying he got hot, but he played really well at the right time in front of college coaches in April, and that kind of led to this? Or had you seen this kind of building for a while once he was able to kind of get on that stage?
Well, he had a great junior year, and I think that kind of catapulted him into like, oh, who's, even from a national perspective, I think it was starting to be like, this guy's somebody to watch. And then he went out, and I believe they were in Texas, and I talked to him about this, after it happened, but they had their first game, and he went 6 for 6 from the 3-point line and had, I think, 29 points, some really good number. And basically that was like Hubert Davis, I know, was at that game. There was a lot of coaches who maybe were laying eyes on him for the first time who, and he's got other good players on his team. So they were, Moreno and Sicily and, maybe they're for, maybe they're for more for other reasons too. And then happened to see him play and he did that. And so then all of a sudden, the momentum is building. And then, that next week, he had, you'd have to go back and look and see the exact timing, but I think he had North Carolina, and just I remember I went out there and talked to him that next week, and his dad was sitting there getting Hurley just text, it's like so all of a sudden, all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, this has gone to another level completely, as far as his recruitment goes. And I always wondered, I remember talking to my boss about this, like I do wonder what happens when, and I really thought it was when, not if. And I didn't know it'd be all this. I figured it'd be, maybe a couple get in there, national names get in there, Kansas or whatever. And I didn't know it'd be to this level. But I said, I do wonder what happens because I always felt like he was, IU was going to be a huge part of his recruitment. And I still think they are. But what happens when those offers come in? And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. It's like, okay, what happens now? And he's going to take these visits and, kind of find out more about these programs. And, and I think if you go to UConn and you're like, hey, I could see myself being here, then it becomes like, then it becomes a real battle, I think. And, then it's, who else is in that class? How soon do you have to commit? All those types of things that, probably not things we need to think about too much at this point, but really are really realistic, for him and his family to kind of look at. I do think the distance from home for in his case is going to be something that's really going to be a consideration, and probably to a certain extent that's always the case, but I think it really is for him. And just finding that place where he feels like he can come in and contribute right away. And I think that'll matter as well. So, it's just I think it's going to be good for him to go see these places, from his perspective, and if you're an IU fan, you probably don't love that idea, but I think it is good for him to kind of know and see, hey, do I see myself fitting in at Duke or North Carolina or wherever he ends up, and I do think Michigan, I think is part of this process too, and they're more of a regional program, and so Kentucky, is close by. So, there's all these things to consider. He's hearing from a lot of people. He's not a, I think he's become more of a of an outgoing person just because of this process, but he's not a kid who loves that part of it. So I wonder about that too. And at some point he may just say, "Hey man, I'm ready. I'm done with all this," and kind of shut it down too. So we'll see. I mean, I think the next month or so. I mean, I don't know if we'll know a whole lot in the next bit. Things will start to happen, certainly by September, with his recruitment, and we'll kind of see what happens from there. But I don't think he's going to rush into anything. I don't want to say that, but I do wonder about all the attention and. Not that he doesn't mind the attention, but it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, there's all these schools coming at you. It's quite a bit for one kid.
Yeah, I talked to him early June, maybe mid June. I don't exactly remember. The months are all running together here, and it was the first time I'd really had an in-depth conversation with him, and I was actually surprised that a lot of kids you talk to them and it's one or two sentence answers, and it's not necessarily they're not. It's not that a lot of them you feel like they don't want to talk. It's maybe they don't know what to say or how to say it when they're being asked kind of in-depth questions about the recruitment. But he was excellent in terms of the answers he was given. It was almost like he, had been doing it a lot lately and seemed to enjoy the process. But I too wonder, like, with all of those names coming at you, all those fan bases, all the social media attention, and just the idea of his high school season, is still a ways off. But do you really want all that to linger once your season starts? Do you want to wrap things up? So to me, it would be surprising if it went past, like the early signing period, because then it becomes a thing where you wait till the spring and then you got the portal too. It feels like you'd want to lock something in at least in the fall and then see how everything plays out. But I wonder, just you mentioned kind of the proximity to home maybe being a factor. What else do you think, just from talking to him and getting to know him a little bit, what other factors do you feel like will be important when he does ultimately make a decision?
I think it's where, I distance from home, certainly. Like you said, I think it's somewhere he can come in and feel like he can contribute right away. I think that will matter. And a guy like him, he's top 25. I mean, there aren't a lot of top 25 guys who I think are just going to be happy with redshirting their freshman year or something like that. So, I think that's probably the expectation for a lot of these schools is, hey, we want you to come in. Whether I don't know how many minutes that would be or whatnot, but probably depends on the school. But I think that will matter to him, and I think. It's I'm always leery, because you do see some stuff about, hey, we may go try to play together or stuff like that. I don't think that ends up happening. Most of the, I have to do a study on that, but you hear stuff like that, and maybe the intention is that, but it rarely ends up happening. So I think maybe people read too much into that a little bit, in my opinion. So I don't think that's going to necessarily, it's going to be, I think, where it ends up family are going to feel comfortable with him being there. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. It's the relationships with the coaches. It's and that's maybe the biggest chunk of it all is just how comfortable you are with the who's coaching you. And that's what I do wonder when we talk about these more of these national schools are those relationships built up enough? Has there been enough time for them to sort of make up ground on the schools that have been recruiting him for a longer period of time? So I think that's maybe the biggest question of all is how he connects with those more national programs, and those guys are good for a reason. So they're, you're up against, like Hurley, for instance. I guarantee when he goes in there and it's going to be impressive, and he's a great recruiter and obviously a great coach. So, that's going to be interesting to me is how they sort of make up that ground on a school like IU, or if they do, and maybe they don't. So, we'll see. I mean, I do wonder about that. To me, I think maybe that's the biggest question of all. But what matters, I think, is going to come down to, and it's a broad thing, is how comfortable you are, but then also the playing time. Not that they can promise you anything, but they can have an idea, I think, of how you fit in. If they've been recruiting you the right way, they kind of know what type of player you are, and then, how comfortable are you, going farther from home if that becomes what you want to do. So. It's a combination, and not to, it's a hard thing to answer for sure, and he would have to answer it completely if he's able to. But I think those things, and knowing him and his family, I think those things do matter. Those are things that do matter to him, and I think just the role, obviously, that he would play as a freshman is going to play a huge part of that as well.